Hey, so welcome back to another video by popular demand from some of my clients. I am going to make a video about the simple past and past continuous. So, like our other videos, what I'm doing here is I'm trying to explain the verb tenses in the context of the timeline, both where we find them on the timeline and how we use the verb tenses in context. So we're going to use the timeline because it's a great visual of looking at the past, the present, and the future, and where our verb tense usage kind of intersects with that past, present, and future, and how we see it as interacting with the other verb tenses that we use. The first one that we're going to do here is the simple present. Now, the simple present is our most general tense, our most widely used tense. It's a really useful one because we use it to kind of express things that are more permanent and general in nature. Specifically, we use it to talk about three particular situations. The first one being habits. And when we talk about habits, we're talking about that kind of repeated activity over time. So, not what we're in the middle of doing necessarily, although we could be, but more about that frequency over time. When we talk about the other two situations, it's facts and habits. Facts and habits, again, have this kind of perspective that even though we're talking about something from the moment of speaking, what we're really kind of expressing is this idea that it was as true yesterday, as it is today, as it will be tomorrow. Now, we know that this is not really possible. Everything changes, facts change, habits change, opinions change, thank goodness. However, what we're expressing is this idea that at the moment of speaking, we see it as permanent and general. And that's really the important part. Now, when we go to the present continuous, we're looking at the basic difference being permanent and general versus temporary and specific. The present continuous, what it has is an end and a beginning, which is a really big difference for us. What it means for us is that when I use the present continuous, I'm telling somebody that there is an end foreseen to my activity. In the simple present, there is simply not an end. Now, when we get to the past tenses, what we want to look for is really look at how we can go about choosing between four major factors. Now, these factors, the first one is whether or not we want to talk about the time or the time reference of the activity in the past. This is really important because time references tend to be a little distracting for people. So, where it appears in the past tends to be a focus of the statement. The second factor we want to think about when we're choosing between our past tenses is whether or not the action is finished. When it is finished and over completely in the past, or if it is up to the moment of speaking. The third factor we're going to look at is whether the activity is isolated or linked. And this is a little bit of a difficult concept at first, but stick with me here. When we talk about an isolated activity, we're really talking about something in the past, but we're not talking about anything else on our timeline. So in other words, we're going to talk about an activity in the past, but we don't really know if the activity took place either before or after that particular activity. We only want to talk about that one activity in the past. When we talk about linking, what we're doing is we're linking the effect of one event on another moment in time. And we'll talk about that more later when we talk about the perfect tenses. The fourth factor that we're going to talk about is whether we're going to refer to the result or the activity. And this can really change how we tell a story. So this is a particularly important aspect. So when we talk about the result, we're just kind of express to you that we did something in the past. And when we focus on the action or the activity, what we're doing is we're focusing on how long it took, if something interrupted us, if something was going on at the same time. So additional information about the activity itself. Now, when we refer to the simple past, if we're going to look at those four factors, time reference is absolutely included for Canadian English. Canadian English requires us to tell you when on the timeline this particular activity occurred. When we look at the simple past as well, for the second factor, it is definitely finished and over and in the past. And this is a really good way in English to kind of put that arm's length between you and the activity itself. When we talk about the third factor, whether it's isolated or linked, we're going to look at the idea that the simple past is isolated. And what that means to us is that when we talk about an activity in the past using the simple past, we're really talking just about that one activity at one moment in time. And we don't really know what happened before or after in the timeline. We're really isolating or putting in a bubble what we're talking about. And finally, for the simple past, we are going to focus on the result instead of the action. And what this means to us is that we're simply kind of trying to express the idea that something happened in the past, but not necessarily more details in terms of how long or what happened at the same time or anything like that. So we would never say, I made a cake for 2 hours last Saturday, for example. For that, we would have to use the past continuous. Now, in terms of the four factors, just as a reminder, the simple past uses a time reference, it's finished, it's isolated, and we're focused on the result. With the past continuous, we're going to look at the same four factors. It does include a time reference. It is finished and over and in the past. And it is isolated, meaning that we're talking about that one event at a particular moment in time. The one difference when we look between the simple past and the past continuous is that instead of focusing on the result, we're going to focus on the action itself. But what does this mean exactly? Well, for the most part, what it means is that when we use the past continuous, we can tell a different type of story than we can tell with the simple past. If you remember, with the simple past, we couldn't really express how long a particular action took us in the past. Well, in the past continuous, that is one of the ways, one of the three ways that we use the past continuous to tell a story. For the past continuous, speaking from the moment of speaking, we use the past continuous to talk about the duration of a particular activity in time. So, for example, we could use the past continuous to say something such as, I was baking a cake for 2 hours last Saturday. It still has a time reference, last Saturday. It's still finished and over, and it's still isolated. You know that I made a cake last Saturday, but you don't know if that was my first or 100th time making a cake. What I have added in terms of detail now is how much time it took me in the past to perform that action. We can also use the past continuous to tell somebody what we were between the beginning and the middle of at a particular point in time in the past. For example, I'm sorry I didn't answer the phone last weekend. I was baking a cake, meaning I had begun before you called me and I finished afterwards. In the second situation where we can use the past continuous, We use it to express the idea of someone interrupting us when we're in the middle of something in the past. So I could say, I was baking a cake when my mother called me last weekend. You'll notice that for the interruption, the activity that was already in progress will get the ing on its verb, and the activity that interrupts us gets the simple past treatment, either the ed or for an irregular verb, the irregular form of the simple past. Note when we talk about an interruption, it can come in either order in the sentence. I can say, I was baking a cake when you called last Saturday, or I can say, when you called last Saturday, I was baking a cake, and we know exactly what that situation is. With the third situation, we're talking about parallel events. So we're talking about two events happening at the same time, not interfering with each other. For both verbs in the sentence, they get treated with the ing, and from that we can infer that one does not interfere with the other. So, as a quick review, we're looking at four basic factors when we look at the past tenses. Now, for the simple past, we include a time reference, it's finished, isolated, and focused on the result. For the past continuous, it includes the time reference, finished, isolated, but instead focuses on the action, and this changes completely the type of story we can tell. When we look at the simple past, because of its limitation of looking just at the result, our stories are subsequent events. I went to the restaurant, I ate my meal, I paid my bill, I left the restaurant. Now, when we look at the past continuous, we have multiple situations we can describe: duration, interruption, and parallel events. So just to recap quickly, today we reviewed the simple present and present continuous, and we found that the general difference between those two tenses is a perspective of permanent and general versus temporary and specific. When we look at our past tenses, we did two of the six past tenses today. We did the simple past and the past continuous. All of the past tenses are some combination of four factors. Whether we include a time reference or not, whether it's finished or not, if it's isolated or linked, or if we're looking to focus on the result or the action itself. For the simple past, it is the time reference, finished, isolated, and result. That is the combination. For the past continuous, we have the combination of time reference, finished, and isolated, just like the simple past. However, it focuses on the action instead of the result. Thanks a lot for listening along today. You can always check back with this simple present and the present continuous video if you want to remind yourself of some of that usage, and we'll be going on to the perfect soon. Thanks a lot.